Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington, and welcome to the Hardball Labor Day show. And for purposes of this holiday, we're calling it The Real Characters of Trump World. President Donald Trump campaigned on his star factor as the host of the reality show The Apprentice. And that mindset has followed him all the way into his presidency, where there's never a slow news day, and every action he takes falls somewhere under unprecedented. For the next hour, we're going to look at the cast of characters of Trump's reality show presidency. There are the villains, the sycophants, of course, the flippers, and the would-be celebrities, of course, and some of them are heading to prison, and others are helping to put former allies in prison. There's been backbiting, social climbing, conspiracies, and yes, relentless drama. And one sideshow came full circle when Omarosa Manigault Newman, who played the villain on The Apprentice and later a White House aide, came out with a new tell-all book. Omarosa's strategy on The Apprentice was to mirror Trump's own behavior. Here she is on season 1.
Heidi was fantastic, and I will tell you that I haven't always been a fan of Heidi. I haven't always thought that she was professional, nor did she have much class or finesse. But in this case,
it's one of the worst compliments I've ever heard.
Best compliment. I have no class.
But I've been very candid with Heidi,
Yes,
have I not?
I appreciate that.
But in this instance,
Clients
her
are gonna love me.
edge
I don't
and
know. I'm not so sure. That's maybe the worst thing I've heard.
That's the worst thing I've heard. I have a lot of class.
That's the worst thing I think I've ever heard. That's the worst compliment I've ever heard.
Well, Omarosa used her book tour to keep her story relevant by making news in every interview. Let's watch. I asked you before a couple hours ago, Omarosa, if you have any other recordings. You wouldn't share them here. Do you got some?
oh, I have plenty.
Anything Mueller would like to see? Mr. Robert Mueller?
If his office calls again,
Would you be a good witness in
I'll
this
share.
investigation by Mueller?
Absolutely, anything that they want, I will certainly.
You think Trump should
corroborate.
be impeached?
At this point, yes.
You were instructed, according to your book, to bring up the emails at every point you could at the end of the 2016
That's
campaign.
correct.
Hillary Clinton's emails.
Yes, that was our talker.
Did Donald Trump know about those emails before they came out?
Absolutely. It's interesting that he's trying to silence me. So what is he trying to hide? He thought, that I could be disposed of. But Donald Trump is wrong. Trevor, I would say this. If you see me in a fight with a bear, pray for the bear. Everything that's in my book, Unhinged, everything that you see is in quotes, is verifiable, it's documented, and it's corroborated.
Why did you feel?
And when others tried to refute her, Omarosa had the tapes to back up her claims. Here's her recording of Chief of Staff John Kelly firing her in the Situation Room.
I think it's important to understand that if we make this a friendly departure, we can all be, you can look at your time here in the White House as a year of service to the nation, and then you can go on without any type of difficulty in the future relative to your reputation.
Well, and after former Trump campaign aide Katrina Pearson said she was never a part of a conversation about whether Trump used the N-word on The Apprentice, Omarosa released a tape of that very conversation about Trump to CBS this morning. Let's listen.
I'm trying to find out at least what context it was used in to help us maybe try to figure out a way to spin it.
Patton then described a conversation she had with then-candidate Trump about making the slur.
I said, well, sir, can you think of any time that this might have happened? And he said no.
Well, that's not true.
He goes, how do you think I should handle it? And I told him exactly what you just said, Omarosa, which is, well, it depends on what scenario you're talking about. And he said, well, why don't you just go ahead and put it to bed? I don't know what the scandal is. No, he said it. He's embarrassed.
Well, Omarosa also released audio of Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, offering her, Omarosa, a job on the 2020 campaign in exchange for her staying quiet about her time in the White House.
Sounds a little like, obviously, that there's some things in the back pocket to pull out. Clearly, if you come over as a campaign, we can't have, we gotta keep everything.
No.
Everybody's positive, right?
I'm joined right now by Shannon Pettypiece, a White House reporter for Bloomberg News, Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com, Betsy Woodruff, politics reporter at The Daily Beast, and Dana Milbank, political columnist with The Washington Post. Also, Jonathan Allen, national political reporter for NBC News Digital. What a cast to talk about what a cast. And I must say that, Shannon, she seems to be the first person to stride onto the stage, and I mean the stage, who has the same abilities for TV, the game that Trump plays so well, that he has.
Well, case in point, having audio. What makes for good TV? Audio, tapes, visuals. She understood that. It's a basic thing. But, President Trump, the ultimate producer, she's also an ultimate producer. Knows how to present herself on TV, knows how to get attention with a tape recording. And I think there's a lot that's been said about Omarosa, but I think she has highlighted a very crucial flaw in Trump, that he has a hard time seeing who his friends are and who his enemies are. She was obviously making these tape recordings for a long time. He obviously thought she was someone he could trust, and has, of course, been proven wrong.
And he built her up, Jason. He stepped back and glowed at her performances on The Apprentice. You could see that.
Kept bringing her through, did the Omarosa Ultimate Merger, a dating show for her. I mean, he created this monster, for lack of a better word. But I have
or a Beckett, if you want to be literary. A Beckett.
But here's the thing that also is fascinating. You could teach a master's class on her book rollout. I have never seen anyone, and we've seen books come out of White Houses before, who managed to do like 72 straight hours of press and drop one little nugget of information on every single show she went on. This is dangerous for national security, but it's a brilliant rollout on her behalf.
And I think it's a fall rollout to come. I think it's still going. Shannon. I mean,
I think that's true. One thing that's important to remember with Omarosa is that she very much was pure showman. During her time in the White House officials told us repeatedly that she just wasn't moving the ball forward on many important issues. And in fact, there was nearly a crisis in the lead up to the first African American History Month of Trump's presidency, because Omarosa was supposed to have a leadership role in setting up events, making things happen. And the night before, certain White House officials realized that there were a number of people who hadn't been invited, who hadn't been looped in. So it was almost a minor crisis. And there's a host of examples of situations like that, where Omarosa, instead of accomplishing jobs she was supposed to get done with, seems to be focused more on being in the room for certain meetings. And of course, the fallout of that is she had recordings from being in the room for those meetings, with tectonic consequences.
A weird way, too. She was perceived by a lot of White House aides as being incompetent, but I was also told that Trump always trusted
incompetent
her. Always
what?
would be.
Right. And what is the function?
What her job was. I mean, I literally asked her that question at a conference last year, and she couldn't really explain it. That's part of how you get in trouble.
But
the president might have the same answer when asked about his job and moving the ball forward. There's a certain cosmic justice in the whole thing here. The president came in, and who's he going to staff his administration with? The usual suspects had absolutely no interest in it. What he did is he built his staff in his own model. It may not be trustworthy, may be a little fast and loose with the truth, questions about loyalty, but brilliant showmen. So this works to an extent when they're all rowing in the same direction. But what you're seeing now with a Michael Cohen, with an Omarosa, is they have prodigious talents if they're used against you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.